Good evening, my lovely Virgos. I was not going to record this one today. I had other things prepared, other energy I had been sitting with, other messages I had been organizing into something deliverable. And then I tuned into your energy, Virgo, and everything else became irrelevant. Because what came through the moment I made contact with what is actually happening around you right now was so specific, so immediate, so impossible to set aside in favor of anything else that I closed everything I had been working on and I started over. Because there is something happening in your world right now that you may be partially aware of, but that you do not yet have the full picture of. Something that is moving through the spaces around you, through conversations you are not part of, through rooms you are not in, through the private exchanges of people who think they are speaking freely because you cannot hear them. They are talking about you, Virgo. Not in the way that people are sometimes talked about, casually, briefly, as a passing reference in a conversation about something else. In the sustained, returning, cannot seem to move past it way. In the way that tells you the subject has a grip on the people discussing it that goes beyond ordinary social commentary. In the way that reveals to anyone paying close enough attention to what is actually driving the conversation rather than what is being said on its surface, that something about you has gotten underneath people's skin in a way they are finding genuinely difficult to process. And the reason the rumors are getting out of hand, Virgo, is not what most people would expect. It is not what the people spreading them would want you to believe it is. And understanding the real reason, the actual engine running underneath the surface of all this talk is going to change the way you carry yourself through every room you walk into from this point forward. Stay with me, because this reading goes somewhere that I think is going to feel like finally understanding something you have been circling for a while without being able to name it directly. Let me tell you how this came through, because the arrival of it was itself significant. It did not arrive as a single impression or a single theme that I then built outward into a reading. It arrived as a landscape, a full, populated, almost cinematic landscape of multiple people in multiple spaces, all engaged in the same essential activity, talking about you. Not coordinated, not organized, not a deliberate campaign of any kind. Simply the natural, spontaneous, independently occurring phenomenon of many different people in many different contexts finding their way to the same subject without any of them having arranged to do so. That kind of spontaneous convergence on a single subject does not happen without a cause. And the cause, when I traced it back to its origin point, was not what the surface of the rumors would suggest. The cause was something much older and much more fundamental than whatever specific narrative is currently being passed around. The cause is you, Virgo. Not anything you did wrong, not any failure or flaw or mistake that is being accurately identified and discussed. Simply you. The specific, unrepeatable, completely authentic version of you that exists in the world right now, moving through your life, doing what you do, being who you are without apology or performance or any particular effort to manage how you are perceived. That version of you is generating a response in the people around you that they do not fully understand and cannot fully control and are attempting to process through the only mechanism available to groups of people who are confronted with something they cannot categorize. They talk about it. Let me start at the actual beginning of this because the beginning reveals something important about the nature of what is being said and why. There was a moment, a specific, identifiable moment, or perhaps a series of moments accumulating into one larger shift where people began to notice something different about you. Not different in the sense of you having changed dramatically or suddenly in a way that would be obvious and easy to point to. Different in the subtler, more unsettling sense of you having arrived at a version of yourself that is more fully and completely present than the version they had been interacting with before. Something settled in you. I feel it clearly in your energy, and I feel it reflected in the energy of the people around you who registered it before they had the language for what they were registering. Something that had previously been slightly uncertain or slightly effortful or slightly performative in the way you moved through the world became, at some point that you may not even be able to pinpoint precisely yourself, simply natural, simply you, simply the automatic, unconsidered expression of someone who has done enough internal work to arrive at a version of themselves they no longer need to manage or maintain or hold in place through conscious effort. And that shift, subtle as it was visible to everyone paying attention, which it turns out was more people than you realized. Let me speak to what the rumors actually are, because I feel the specific shape of them, and I think naming that shape clearly is one of the most valuable things I can offer you in this reading. There are multiple threads running simultaneously through what is being said about you, and they are not all the same in their character or their origin or the specific type of person who is carrying them. I want to walk through each one separately because they deserve individual examination rather than being collapsed into a single, undifferentiated mass of talk. The first thread is the one being carried by people who are responding to something they cannot explain about your energy. These are not people who are hostile toward you. They are not people with an agenda or a grievance or a specific investment in damaging your reputation. They are simply people who have encountered something in you that disrupted their existing framework for understanding you and who are processing that disruption the way people process things they cannot categorize on their own. By talking about it with someone else, what they are saying in these conversations is not mean-spirited. It is confused. It is the specific, slightly odd, slightly unsettled conversation of people trying to describe something they experienced and found significant without fully understanding what made it significant. They are saying things like, there is something different about them, or I cannot put my finger on it, but something has changed, or simply, have you noticed? The conversation that follows those openings is not cruel, it is curious. And the curiosity driving it is the specific curiosity of people who have been brushed by something they recognize as real and are trying to understand what they just encountered. The second thread is the one being carried by people who are responding to your energy from a very different place. A place that is not confused or curious, but that is, if I am being completely honest with you in the way this reading requires, threatened. These are people who have a specific investment in a particular version of you, a version that is smaller than what you actually are, a version that places you in a clearly defined category in their mental architecture of their social world, a category that keeps you at a manageable distance from anything that would require them to reckon with the gap between your actual capacity and theirs. And the version of you that has been showing up lately, the fuller, more settled, more completely yourself version, does not fit that category. What they are saying about you in their conversations is not what they are presenting as being about. On the surface, it may look like gossip. It may carry the texture of criticism or speculation or the kind of social commentary that passes itself off as simple conversation. But underneath the surface of it, what is actually driving these conversations is not information or concern or even genuine opinion. It is the specific, uncomfortable energy of people who are being confronted with evidence that their existing framework for understanding you is insufficient. And rather than revising the framework, which would require them to revise other things they are not ready to revise, they are doing what people do when a framework is threatened. They are defending it by generating talk that supports the smaller version, by circulating narratives that attempt to explain away or diminish the fuller version they are being confronted with. This thread of the rumors is the most visible one, the loudest one, the one you are most likely to have heard about in some form. And it is, ironically, the least truthful of all the threads currently running, precisely because it is the most motivated, the most invested in a particular conclusion, the most shaped by what someone needs to be true rather than what actually is. I need to pause here because something is arriving very specifically for several of you, and I do not want to move past it without addressing it directly. For some of you, the person leading this second thread of conversation is someone who was once significantly closer to you than they are now. Someone who had real access to you at some point, who knew things about you that most people don't know, who was trusted with a version of yourself that you do not offer casually. And the specific nature of what they are saying in these conversations carries, underneath the surface of it, the particular bitterness of someone who has lost something they valued and who is now engaged in the very human, very understandable, but ultimately very revealing behavior of trying to make what they lost seem less valuable than it actually was. Because if what they lost was not that valuable, then losing it does not cost them as much, and the accounting of their own choices becomes more comfortable. Watch for this one closely, Virgo, because what this person is saying about you in these conversations tells you far more about their own interior experience of your absence from their life than it tells you anything true about you. And that interior experience, when you read it clearly for what it actually is not anger. It is grief wearing anger's clothing. Grief, and something that is uncomfortably close to the specific regret of someone who understands on some level they would never admit to directly that what they're talking about dismissively in these conversations is something they have not actually been able to stop thinking about. The third thread is the one I want you to pay the most attention to, Virgo, because it is the one that carries the most truthful information about how you are actually being perceived by the broader landscape of people in your world. This thread is not gossip in the traditional sense. It does not carry the specific charge of something being passed between people because of its entertainment value or its social utility or its capacity to produce a particular impression of someone in the listener's mind. It carries a different charge entirely. The charge of something being said because the person saying it genuinely cannot help themselves, because they encountered something in you that produced a response they felt compelled to share, not to anyone who would listen, not broadly or carelessly, but specifically to the people they trust most with the things that genuinely move them. What is being said in these conversations is closer to testimony than gossip, closer to someone describing an experience they had and finding that the person they are describing it to immediately understands exactly what they mean, has had the same experience themselves, and was waiting for someone else to name it first. What is being said is that there is something about you, Virgo, that stays with people, that lingers after you leave a room or a conversation or any kind of encounter, that produces in people the specific, somewhat disorienting experience of finding you in their thoughts later in moments that have nothing to do with you, when something in their environment or their experience reminds them of something about you without them having consciously made the connection. You are haunting people, Virgo, in the most beautiful, most unintentional, most completely authentic sense of that word. Not through effort or strategy or any kind of deliberate cultivation of mystique, simply through the natural, unmanaged effect of being completely and unapologetically yourself in a world where most people are something slightly less than that. Have you noticed any shifts in how people engage with you recently? A different quality of attention from people you've known for a long time? A new kind of seriousness in the way certain conversations are directed at you? A sense that people are paying closer attention to what you say and do than they used to, without you having done anything deliberate to earn that additional attention? Let me know in the comments, because I think a significant number of you are living inside exactly this shift right now without having fully named it to yourselves. I want to speak to your nervous system here, Virgo, because I know that hearing there are rumors circulating about you, regardless of what those rumors actually are or what is actually driving them, produces a specific kind of response in someone with your particular sensitivity to being misrepresented. You do not like being talked about, not because you are insecure or fragile or excessively concerned with what others think in the general sense, but because you have a deep, fundamental commitment to accuracy, to things being understood correctly, to the truth of who you are being represented faithfully rather than filtered through someone else's limited or motivated perception of you. And the knowledge that conversations are happening in spaces you cannot access about you, carrying versions of you that you have had no opportunity to represent or correct, produces in you a specific kind of discomfort that is less about ego and more about the fundamental offense of inaccuracy. I want to say something about that discomfort that I think is important for you to hear. You cannot control what is being said in those rooms. You cannot access those conversations. correct the record in real time, or ensure that every version of you being passed between people reflects the full truth of who you actually are. That lack of control for someone with your particular relationship to accuracy and truth is one of the harder things to sit with in a situation like this. But here is what you can control: how you show up in the spaces you actually occupy, the consistency and the fullness and the complete unmanaged authenticity of the version of you that people encounter directly. Because the most powerful response to rumors, whatever their content or their origin, is not a counter narrative. It is the simple, sustained, impossible to argue with, the presence of the real thing. You cannot correct what is being said in rooms you are not in. But you can be so fully, so completely, so undeniably yourself in the rooms you are in that the gap between the rumor and the reality becomes obvious to anyone with enough discernment to notice it. Inhale with me for a second, Virgo. Because I want to say something about what this moment in your life is actually signaling beyond the surface discomfort of knowing that talk is happening, because I don't think the significance of it is being fully registered yet. The fact that you are being talked about at this volume across this many different threads by this many different people with this many different relationships to you and motivations for the conversations they are carrying is not ordinary. People do not generate this kind of sustained, widespread, multi-directional attention around someone who is simply moving through life at an ordinary level. They generate it around someone who is operating at a frequency that is noticeably, undeniably, impossible to ignore, different from what surrounds them. You are that person right now, Virgo, whether you feel like it from the inside of your own experience or not. Whether the version of yourself you encounter in your own private moments seems remarkable to you, or simply like the ordinary texture of being who you are. From the outside, from the perspective of the people in these conversations, what they are responding to is something they cannot look away from, something that produces in them a compulsion to discuss, to process, to share their experience of encountering you with someone else who might be able to help them make sense of it. That is not a burden, even though it can feel like one, when the talk takes forms you would not have chosen. It is evidence. Evidence of something real and significant happening in you and through you that the world around you is responding to in the only way it knows how. Let me speak to what comes next, because the energy doesn't stop at the current moment, and I want you to understand the direction it is heading. Some of the conversations that are currently happening in your absence are going to reach you. Not all of them. Not the ones that exist only in private spaces between people who have no real connection to you and whose opinions of you carry no real weight in the landscape of your actual life. But some of them, the ones that matter, the ones that carry information you need to have, either because they reveal something true about someone in your circle or because they carry something that belongs to you. A recognition, an acknowledgement, a form of witnessing that has been happening in your absence and that you deserve to have delivered directly. Be ready to receive what comes, not with defensiveness and not with the kind of preemptive protection that would keep you from actually hearing what is being offered, with the specific Virgo quality of clear-eyed, fully present, completely honest reception. Some of what reaches you is going to sting, even if the sting is the familiar one of being misrepresented by someone whose opinion you have already assessed correctly. Some of it is going to surprise you with its warmth. with the specific quality of being told by someone who means it, something true and generous about the effect you have on people that you have not been giving yourself credit for. Let the sting and the warmth both land without collapsing either into something more manageable than it actually is. As we move toward the close of this reading, I want to speak to something that I feel is the deepest and most important layer of everything that has come through today. Something that sits beneath all the talk, beneath all the threads of conversation, beneath the threatened ones and the confused ones and the ones that are closer to testimony than gossip. Something about you is undeniable right now, Virgo. That is the engine. That is what is driving all of this. The specific, authentic, fully inhabited version of you that has been showing up in the world lately has a quality to it that people cannot dismiss, cannot categorize comfortably, cannot fold into the existing mental architecture they had built for understanding who you are and what you represent in their world. And the people who cannot dismiss it are doing the only other thing available to them. They are talking about it, some of them with admiration barely disguised as casual conversation. Some of them with the specific urgency of people trying to diminish something before it gets too large to manage, and some of them with the simple, genuine, completely unguarded testimony of people who encountered something real and felt compelled to say so to someone they trust. All of it, every thread, every conversation, every room you are not in where your name is being said, is a response to the same source. You, Virgo. Fully present, fully inhabited, fully and without apology yourself. That is what is getting out of hand. And the only thing you need to do about it is exactly what you have already been doing. Continue being it, without managing it, without softening it for the comfort of people who find it easier to talk about than to simply stand in the presence of. The talk will continue as long as what generates it continues, and what generates it is not going anywhere. Neither are you. If this reading moved something real in you today, please share it with a Virgo who needs to feel this energy right now. And leave me a comment below. Tell me which thread of this reading landed most specifically in the center of your experience. Tell me if you already knew some version of this was happening. Tell me what it feels like to understand the real reason behind what people are saying. I read every single word you share with me, every comment, every story. I carry your energy with genuine care long after this video ends. Until next time, Virgo, let them talk. What they are responding to is real and it belongs to you completely, and no conversation held in your absence has ever had the power to touch that. Not even close.